Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to 12 of using the Power Platform to extend finance and operations apps. Today's topic is customer voice. My name is Erin, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this virtual event through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you are agreeing to this experience. The recording will be available on TechTalk's Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have any questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the session, and we will use the time left to address questions at the end. Closed captions are available today in Spanish, French, German, Italian, Chinese, and Russian. To turn on closed captioning, click the CC button located on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. To change languages, click the gear icon and make your choice. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Kicking us off today from Microsoft, we have Rachel Profitt, Fast Track Solution Architect. Rachel, over to you.
Thanks, Erin. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining from. I'm very excited to be wrapping up our series today talking about Dynamics 365 Customer Voice, which was formerly known as Forms Pro. When we sent out the original invitations, it was actually called Forms Pro, but it's since then been renamed to Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. So let's go ahead and get started with some quick introductions. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Profitt. I am a Senior Fast Track Solution Architect based out of the Denver, Colorado area in the United States. My contact information is here on the screen, and I invite you to contact me with any questions that you might have. Follow me on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn, or check out my blog at dynamics365lady.com. Also joining me today, I have Welly Lee. Welly, do you want to go ahead and do a quick introduction of yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Welly. I'm the head of product engineering team for Customer Voice. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Welly. So let's take a look at the objectives for today's Tech Talk. We're going to be talking about Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. So we're going to introduce the concept and kind of what you would use this product for, which again was formerly known as Forms Pro. We're also going to describe a variety of use cases for using Customer Voice with your finance and operations data. We're also going to demonstrate how to get started and build your first survey with Customer Voice. And then we're going to switch gears and kind of demonstrate how you can use Customer Voice data with your finance and operations apps data. We'll wrap up with some do's and don'ts for using Customer Voice and some best practices around Customer Voice with finance and operations apps. A few things that we're not going to be discussing in today's session include detailed licensing aspects or detailed aspects of Power Apps, Power Automate, Dual Write, or Virtual Entity. Although these technologies are in play today in our session, I do invite you to check out Tech Talks earlier in this series, and for Dual Write and Virtual Entities, there's some independent Tech Talks that are available out on the Tech Talks Dynamics community page. So let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda and flow of today's session. We're going to start out with that introduction to Dynamics 365 Customer Voice with Welly, and then we're going to switch gears and I'm going to talk a little bit about those Customer Voice use cases. Then Welly's going to show you how to get started and build your first survey with Customer Voice. And then we've got a couple of demonstrations that we're going to show you on how to use Customer Voice with your finance and operations data. We'll wrap up today with the do's and don'ts, as well as a checklist and resources. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Welly to introduce us to Dynamics 365 Customer Voice.
Thank you, Rachel. So Customer Voice. So as Rachel mentioned that we make a transition from Forms Pro. Forms Pro was released about a year and a half ago in July 2019. And we rebranded into Customer Voice in July last year. Why do we do that? So there are a couple of things. One is that we want to make it clearer in terms of what is the intent of this product. And secondly, with the rebranding, we also have introduced a new UX that that have additional functionalities to help you in terms of building your end-to-end customer feedback management solution. So what is it that we're trying to do with the customer voice? What we try to do is that we don't try to make it easy for you to capture your customer sentiment. We want to democratize customer feedback management solution so that anyone, any business can easily collect the feedback from your customers. Now, this is beyond just about sending a survey. You can use many tools that is out there available in the market to be able to send a survey. But what we believe that is important is not just about sending a survey. What's important is that how do you capture your customer feedback and integrate it as part of your business process. And this is where we believe that we have a differentiation against any other tool in the market, because Customer Voice is built on top of Microsoft Business Application Platform, which means that if you have Dynamics, your customer feedback is automatically connected to your customer records in Dynamics. Even if you don't have Dynamics, your data is automatically written into Dataverse, which means that you can use the tools that you're already using, like Power BI, Power Automate, and Power App, to take advantage of the customer feedback data that is stored in the Dataverse. And on top of that, we also want to help you to make it easy for you to get an insight from your feedback. So this include, we have a built-in AI, for example, to capture a sentiment, and we're going to invest more, especially this year, in building out-of-the-box report based on the common practice to make it easy for you to get an insight from your customer, as well as also closing the loop with your customers. I'm going to demo that a little bit later. Now, with that, I'll turn it back to Rachel to discuss about the use case for Customer Voice in F&O. Rachel?
Thanks so much, Welly. So taking a look at our first use case today, I really want to talk a little bit about the kind of order satisfaction scenario. I think this is an easy concept to understand. And the idea here is that we can collect data. When we think about order satisfaction with Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations apps, this could mean a couple of different things. We could be asking customers about shipping quality. We could be asking customers about product quality, but we could also be asking, internal users or people in your organization about product quality. So if we think about like a manufacturing industry type example, we could ask, people on the production line or quality assurance team members in your organization about product quality at different stages in the production process. We could also gather net promoter scores when we're gathering that information. And, once we collect that data, we can start to automate those processes. So some things that we could do is we could notify the customer about product and shipping managers, we could notify product and shipping managers when there's a problem, but we could also be notifying, other people in your organization. So if there's, quality issues or production issues, depending on the type of survey, we can notify people when the sentiment or the results from that survey are negative. We have the ability to also send surveys automatically, so we can trigger those surveys to be sent when things happen inside of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations apps. So that could be the order is delivered, it could be the order is picked, it could be a production order, step in the process is complete. And because we can integrate with Power Automate, we can use all of the connectors and all of the goodness of the Power Platform to help automate our business processes either before or after that survey is being sent. So the survey can just be one component of your automation story. And after you've collected data and you've automated your processes, we can now start to analyze data. So when we think about finance and operations app and the order satisfaction use case, we can analyze customer sentiment, see, kind of how do my customers think about me? We can look at those individual responses and analyze trends using tools that are built right into Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. We've provided a variety of links at the bottom of the slide here, and these slides will be available with the recording. I encourage you to check these out to learn more about Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. So moving on to our next scenario, I want to talk a little bit about that quality check use case. When we think about quality check in an organization when we're using finance and operations apps, from an ERP perspective, could mean a number of different things. So, for example, we could check for quality on delivered services. So if you are providing services, not just products, but services to your customers, we can, ask customers, or even from an IT perspective or an HR internal perspective, your customers are your employees. You could be asking about, how are the services that you're getting from, those other departments within your organization. We could also validate project performance. A lot of organizations and finance and operations apps use the project management and accounting module, or you may be considering the new project operations product. And, depending on the product you're using, we support both internal investment type projects as well as external type projects where you might be working with a variety of customers and suppliers and so on. And when we think about using customer voice with that, we can validate the project performance. So we can ask questions about, of your suppliers about the products that have been provided. We can ask questions of the customers about the service and the quality, that they're getting. You could also gather feedback for an assessment. If you're a services type organization, or even like a engineering type organization where everything is made to order, you might need to gather information in order to provide an assessment or a quote or, put a project together in some cases. So you can use surveys as a way to gather that feedback and that data so that you can start to put an assessment together even before you're ready to go to a quote or an order. So when we think about how we can use these different types of scenarios, and this is just a short list of things that you could do, by no means an exhaustive list. I've split it up into embedding and automation experiences. So from an embedding standpoint with finance and operations apps, we have the ability to embed a a Dynamics 365 customer voice survey as a third-party web app through personalization. So we can use that personalization toolbar. You can also use X++ to embed third-party web apps as pages or forms, tabs in a workspace, or a fast tab in the application. We also have the ability to embed in a model-driven Power App, and those model-driven Power Apps can be embedded directly into finance and operations apps as well. And we talked about that earlier in our series when we did the model-driven app session. You could add links to workspaces. So on the far right-hand side of all of the different workspaces that we have in finance and operations, we have the ability to embed URL links. So that would be another way that you could surface a survey out into a workspace for users to access. And then we can also use the data that we gather in the Dataverse to create a mashup of survey results with our finance and operations data in Power BI. And from a Power BI standpoint, right, in finance and operations, we have that ability to make embedded workspaces or embedded Power BI, as well as the Power BI pinning. So depending on exactly what you're trying to do, there's a variety of ways that you can embed those analytics right into the user experience within finance and operations. When we think about automating, we can do things like using Power Automate to automatically send a survey based on a CRUD operation that's happening on a virtual entity, or even in a native entity if you're using dual write. We can create a business event and trigger that from finance and operations and use Power Automate. You'll actually see an example of this. And we can create a button extension. So if you actually wanted to customize and write X++ and add a new button to a form, you could create a button that calls your own logic that executes one of these surveys. We also have the ability to automatically update finance and operations app data with the survey response data. Because that survey response data is stored in the Dataverse, we could use either virtual entities or dual write in order to, and along with the Power Automate, to copy that data back in, create records, update existing records, and so on. So a lot of flexibility there. Taking a look at our next set of examples, we have a customer voice employee satisfaction use case. And this slide is really more centered around some of the things that we can do with Dynamics 365 human resources, although you could do all of these with finance and operations as well. But we could do an annual pulse about, benefits that you're providing to your employees. You could do a self-evaluation for performance. You'll actually see an example of this in our demos later today. You could also do like a quarterly feedback where you check in with employees about how their manager is performing. Again, when you're embedding in HR, we have that ability to embed as a third-party app through personalizations or through a model-driven app. And in HR, we also have that extra ability to add a link to a workspace. When we think about employee and manager self-service, it's a little bit more robust, and we can control that for all employees and managers through those human resources parameters. From an automation standpoint, we can do many of the same things. We can use Power Automate from a CRUD event that is happening on the native entities that are in the common data services. We could also use alert rules to trigger that Power Automate through a business event, or automatically update HR with response data and mash up those survey results again using Power BI. So with that, I am going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about how to get started. So for our first demonstration, I'm going to show you a very short, quick demonstration on how to install Dynamics 365 Customer Voice. If you have a Dataverse without customer engagement in it, you'll need to go through this process. So I'm here in AppSource, and I've pulled up the Dynamics 365 Customer Voice application, and all you need to do is click on Get It Now, and then click OK to confirm that you want to install this. It'll open up a new window where you'll need to select the environment that you want to connect to. So you'll click on that drop-down box and choose the environment that you want to select. And then after you select that environment, you'll need to agree to the terms and then click Install. This will bring you back to the Power Platform Admin Center, where you'll be able to see the status of your installation. You can see in this screenshot here, it's actually already installed. But if the status is, if it's still installing, you'll see the status there will say installing. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Welly now, who's going to actually introduce how to start using customer voice to build your first survey.
Thank you, Rachel. So how do you use customer voice? So after you, so just to clarify what Rachel said, that you only need to install those solution if your Dataverse environment do not have customer engagement. If you are using customer voice in the context of customer engagement, the solution is already installed, and all you need to do is go to customervoice.microsoft.com, or you can also access customer voice through the workflow menu or the app launcher in M365. You go to customer voice and you land to this portal. The first time that you land to portal, you'll be taken straight to the template gallery. In order to make it easier for you to create your customer feedback management solution, we provided a template for you. This is based on commonly used customer feedback scenarios. We started with the templates around the customer feedback. We are going to add more templates, including potentially those scenarios for F&O. But if you are connecting feedback periodically to your customer, for example, you could use this template. This is a template that we built in collaboration with Forrester Research. These include questions that Forrester Research asking their the customers in order to as part of their customer experience index. Or if you want to send survey to your customers after you deliver your products, and you can use this template that will send the survey to after the order is completed in Dynamics, and we're going to talk about this. Rachel's going to talk about this later. But if you don't have any of these scenarios, then you can start with a blank template. For demo today, I'm going to show you an example of a real-life case from one of our customers. This is a bank customers that want to send a feedback to their customers when they open a new account. So I can use a blank template. And the next is where I can choose the data first instance that I would like to connect this feedback to. Now, if you don't use Dynamics 365 to manage your customers, then you can choose the default instance. All the Microsoft 365 organization have this default data first that's installed automatically, and we use that to write the customer the survey data into, so that you do not need to export the data from our surveys, so you can connect directly to this data first instance, whether that is the dynamic instance or the default instance, to build your reporting. So for this, I am connected to my Dynamics CRM instance, and I'm landed to this blank canvas when you can start creating your survey. So if you, and then we provide several suggestions, also several commonly used question types. So for example, if you are using NPS as a way for you to measure your customer feedback, you can choose the NPS questions. You can customize the text questions. And let's say if you want to add more questions, you can choose a type. For example, you can have a text question. Then you can choose whether this is a text comment that added a long answer, make it required, and so on. Another thing that we recommend our customers to do is to personalize your survey. So one way to do that is that we provide a way for you to create what we call survey variable. And this is an important concept that we are going to revisit later as part of the demo. So let's say that you want to personalize your survey, so that you want to include, if you send this survey when customers open a new account at a particular brands, maybe you want to include the brand's name where they open the new account. So you can add this as a variable, and then you can use that as part of your survey questions. For our, and then insert the brand's name. Just like that, then you can send a survey that is personalized based on your customer experience. I'm going to show you a little bit later how you populate this value. So now that you are, and then there are other things that you can do. We can do the branching to do this conditional logic. You can translate this into different language. You can brand your survey and so on. But now let me switch to how do you distribute this survey. So we provide several ways for you to distribute your survey. One way, Rachel touched about this before, is that you can embed this survey as part of your website. So if you do this, then you can choose whether this is you're going to be embedded inside the web page itself, or you appear as a pop-up, or you want to have like a button maybe in your web page, just click and then open the survey. And notice that, so then we generate a script that you can hand it to your webmaster, so that this can be integrated as part of your web pages. And notice that as part of the script, this is a JavaScript, and one of the input is the brand's name. Imagine that you want to embed this on your website, and let's say that there is a different pages for the different brands. And what you can do is that you can embed this feedback on that specific brand's page, a dynamic page. Then you can pass the name of the brands when you call this survey. And that is one way you can pass the value of the brands that the customers is on, and then that will be reflected in the survey. So that is one way you can personalize your survey. Another way is that, let's say that you want to send a survey to a group of your customers, then you can import a template with the list of customers through a template. And if you open this template, then you can populate with a list of your customers, and you can specify for each of the customers what the brands they open the account on, and that will be used when to personalize that specific survey. So let's say that you have 100 contacts that you want to send a survey. Each will have 100 value of the brand name. When you send this to the customers, each of those customers will have a unique link. By that unique link, that will pull the right variable values for that customers, as well as when they submit the response, we can trace back like which link this is mapped to which customer, so that can be automatically updated in the backend. Another thing that you can do is that if you are using Dynamics 365, so in this case, when I create the project, then I connect it to the Dynamics 365 instance, and this is the same instance that I connected this survey to. Now this has several contacts. Then I've also created some custom view that filter based on high value customers. So for if you want to send a survey to these high value customers from here, then you can simply can I put that too low? Give me 1 second. So you can type in the high value customers from this, and then send it to all those contacts that belong to the high value customers. Another thing that I want to show you that we also support what you call embed the survey questions in the email. So you can send this, and this will be shown in the email invite itself. And this is one of the best practice in terms of using this first question as part of the survey invite. So you send it over, and then when you send over, then we'll provide you with the some statistics in terms of how many invite that you send, and then if they respond, that we report it to you, a fail, and so on. And the other thing that we also support is that sending automatic reminder. If you don't hear from your customers, then we will automatically send a reminder. Another thing that we also support is that we support the contact frequency limit. This is something that a lot of our customers are concerned that with this feature is available to the business in order to collect feedback. You also don't want to overwhelm your customers by them getting too many surveys. So we support this contact frequency limit, in which then you can set how frequent your customers should receive a survey. So if any part of your employee is sending a survey again to the same customers, if that customers already received a survey, then you will automatically be blocked, and you get notified that this customer has received a survey before. One other thing that I want to show you is that I mentioned that this is you can add this variable that you can use to send a survey, personalize the survey questions. But in addition to that, you also can use this as a way for you to provide more context to your report. So, for example, Rachel mentioned earlier that you can use customer voice not just to send survey externally, but you can also use a customer voice to collect feedback from your employee. And one of the common thing that you want to do with employee feedback is to collect the feedback anonymously, but you still want to capture some information about the employee. For example, let's say that you can create a variable about the department and maybe the location. And when you send in the email, then you can populate those the list of employee with what department or location they're part of. And what you can do is that you can set this as anonymous response. That if you check this, then we will not record any PII information about the responder. And then you can choose which are the variables that you still want to collect. In that case, perhaps you want to still collect the department and location, while you do not capture the first name and last name. So while honoring the feedback to remain anonymous, you can still get some information about which department or which location this feedback is coming from, so that you can create an actionable action plan based on the feedback from those department and location. Now, so what does the report look like? Let me switch to the finished or the populated survey. So this is the survey from that bank. So this bank actually sent two surveys. They send a survey when the customers open a new account. They also send a survey when the customers complete the home loan. So within the customer voice, you create a project. You don't create a survey. And within a project, you can create multiple surveys. And in each of the survey, they were using NPS as a way to keep track of the key measurements of the customer satisfaction. In customer voice, you can define what we call satisfaction metrics, and we support different types of satisfaction metrics, including NPS, CSAT, and sentiment, and we are also releasing features to be able to create the custom index and how you want to measure your customer satisfaction. And with that, then let's say that you have this, in this case, NPS, and you can define the satisfaction metrics of NPS, and you can map that to the survey questions. And what that gives you is that we automatically build a dashboard that show you what is your latest NPS score across all the survey that this satisfaction metric is mapped to. In this case, because there's two projects and all of them use the same NPS metrics, then this is automatically aggregated, and we provide you also with the trend over time. You can filter based on the specific survey or the specific day. And on top of that, with the satisfaction metrics, we also support alerts. So what the alert is that you can choose your satisfaction metric, maybe offer NPS, and let's say that you check the condition. If you receive a feedback that is less than promoter, you can get an automatic alert so that it helps you to make a timely follow-up action to your customers. So that is so you can, with the customer voice, to recap, you can easily create a survey, send the survey, and then also monitor the result, as well as also to set alert to help you with the follow-up action. With that, let me turn back to Rachel.
Thanks, Welly. So we're going to take a look at a sample of how to get started with your first survey with finance and operations. So in this example, we're going to use the sales order delivery satisfaction template. And everything that you're going to see is out of the box. There's no extensions. It's just some simple configurations. So we're going to set up that dual write. I'm going to show you how to create that survey in the project and how to select the flow and build that flow. I'll show you kind of what it looks like. Then I'm going to switch back over to finance and operations and show you how to create that customer a sales order. I'm going to pack that sales order so that it's delivered. And then we'll go look at the flow run results. I'll complete that survey, and then we'll go review those survey results. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to the demo. So we're going to start out here in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, and we're going to open up the data management workspace. So we'll go ahead and click on the tile for data management. And when this opens up, we'll click on the dual write tile to open up the dual write. In this example, I've already configured the dual write for all of the out-of-the-box mappings for contacts, customers, the sales order headers and lines, and you can see there's a number of additional things that are also being synced via those dual write maps. So what we'll do is we're going to switch over to Dynamics 365 Customer Voice, and we're going to create a new project. For this example, I'm selecting the order delivery template and then clicking Next. I select the dataverse that I want to connect to and click Create. And this will create that new survey from that template. You have the ability to look through this, make changes, edits, add personalization, branding, all those things that Welly was just talking to us about. But when you're ready, we can go ahead and click send. So I'm going to choose automation. And for this example, we're going to choose one of the out-of-the-box templates. So it's send a survey when an order is fulfilled in Dynamics 365. So I click on this template, and then you'll want to confirm those details. It'll take a second to load because it's going to make connections in your Power Automate. So these are the connections. I click continue to confirm and then create. You can also edit it directly from there. And right now, I don't have any survey results. So we're going to switch over to the Maker portal, and I'm going to open up the survey that was just created. You can see it hasn't been run yet, and we'll click on Edit. So this Power Automate flow, the template, it's triggered off of orders. So when an order is created or updated, and you can see I'm just checking for the status value to be equal to 3. And then I check to see, is it an account or a customer? If it's an account, I'm going to look up and get the account record. If it's a contact, I'll look up the contact. And for both branches, we're sending that survey. The data that we're passing in is slightly different for the regarding and the recipient, but otherwise they're exactly the same, and we're sending that same survey that we just created. All of this was automatic. I didn't have to do anything, any clicking or setting up here, but obviously you have the ability to edit and update these. So I'm back in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, and I'm going to open up the customers page, and we're going to create a new customer. So for this example, I'm going to create myself. So I'll put in my contact information here. I can obviously enter additional information, but it's very important you need to put an email address in, so I have somewhere to email this to. And then we'll click Save. Once that customer information is saved, I'm going to go ahead and click to create a sales order for this customer. And then we'll add a line to the sales order. So for this example, I'm going to choose some speakers, cables. So I choose that speaker cable item, and I enter in the details about the quantity, the site, the warehouse, and so on. Obviously, I can do anything that I normally would to a sales order here. For simplicity's sake, I'm keeping it pretty simple. I do need to select a size here. So I'll choose that size. And then after I'm done creating my sales order, I'm going to confirm it. As soon as this record is saved, that's actually when I'm writing that record over to the Common Data Service. I'm confirming that sales order, which actually updates the status in the Common Data Service. And then after the sales order is confirmed, I'm going to go ahead and pack it. Obviously, if you're using advanced warehouse management or even some of the other warehousing features of Dynamics 365, those still work and will trigger it. I'm just doing this manually for demonstration purposes. So I'll click OK to confirm the packing slip. And now at this point, my sales order has been delivered. So I'm going to switch over to Dynamics 365 Sales. We're going to start by opening up the contacts page, and we'll search for the contact. So this is the account that I just created in Finance and Operations. So I'll search for my name. And you can see there's my record. It's the one in the middle with my email address. And if we click on that to open it, you can see all of the additional details that synchronized over from Finance and Operations. If I click the Details tab, all the additional fields, had I filled those things in, would have been updated here. Now I'm going to switch over to the Orders page. I'm going to search for myself again. So we'll find that order that was just created. So there it is, number 334. That's the sales order that I just created. So if we open that up, I can see the details about the order, which synchronized. And if I click on the Details tab, this is where you can see the timeline. And in this case, you can see that a survey has been sent. So that means that my flow has triggered. And I can click to open up the details of that. I can see the survey invitation URL and so on. So I'm going to switch over to my email and pull up that survey that was just sent to me and click Begin Survey, which will open up a new window. And I can start to take that survey. So it's a very quick and easy survey. And then I hit Submit. When I hit Submit, this is actually triggering the second flow. Actually, not in this scenario. We don't have a second flow. But it is automatically updating those survey results back into Dynamics 365 Sales. And if I scroll down on that details page, now I can actually see the response details, the satisfaction metrics, And any of the personalization, so all of that context data that was passed in is also brought back over here. So I can see all the full results, exactly what it looked like to the customer when they took that survey, and all of the responses are stored in here as well. So in this example, you saw how we can get started with a survey, no customization required, just some simple configuration. And now what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears a little bit and show you some examples of how we can use customer voice with finance and operations, where we do some extensions and some customization in that process. For that, I'm going to hand us over to Welly for our first demonstration.
Right. So one thing that Rachel talked earlier about, one of the things that our customers commonly use is that they want to collect feedback as part of the purchase order process. So if you issue a purchase order to your vendors, and then the vendors deliver the products, and then one thing that you might want to do is that you want to send a survey to the buyer, the person inside your organization who make the purchase, to ask about how is the vendor is doing, whether they deliver the goods on time, what is the quality of the product, and so on. So in this example, what we do is that we create a survey, and then we are using the Power Automate to monitor a business event when the purchase order is received, trigger the workflow, get the buyer information, and send the survey to the buyer. And then we're going to create another Power Automate workflow when the survey is received. And when you send the survey, then another thing that we do is that we're using the survey variable that we talked about. We are passing the vendor ID and PO, so that when the response is received, we can use that information to update back the PO information with the feedback and data. So let's take a look. So for this, then I start with the survey. Then I create my survey in customer voice. So I have this matrix type of questions, as well as adding another questions to a free text question at the end. And then I am using the personalization, adding a variable for the purchase order as well as the vendor ID, which we are going to populate through Power Automate. Once I do that, then I am and then I'm set with the Power Automate. So like I mentioned, create the trigger as for the business event when the purchase order received, parse the information from the PO, get the buyer information, and I'm going to create a new step. And then I'm going to search for customer voice send survey action. And I'm going to pull the primary email of the buyer and select the project and the survey from customer voice. And then I'm going to populate with the value from the buyer, including first name, last name, as well as also get the vendor account and the purchase order. And that's it. I have my workflow set up. Now I go to FNO, go to the PO. I am going to the PO and receive it. Sorry, this is a little bit too quick. So let me go back a little bit. So I am in the PO. I'm confirming the PO. I'm receiving the PO. Once I receive the PO, enter the information. Then now I'm on the second workflow, which is the first workflow. This is something that I send the survey, and then this is succeeded. And then the buyer will receive an email with requesting for the feedback, filling in the feedback, submit it, and then I am on the second workflow, which is the monitoring for when the survey's response is received, get the survey variable from the survey response, which is the PO number as well as the vendor ID. Once I have that information, then I can use the update, the data update record action, and use the PO and vendor ID to update that PO header. With that, I am also going to update with the survey response link. So when I go back to the PO, once the survey response is received, then you can see that the survey link to the survey has been updated. and I can click on it, and I can open the survey directly from FNO. Let's take a look at another use case for employee performance self-review. Rachel?
Thanks, Swelly. So in this example, I'm using Dynamics 365 Human Resources, and I've enabled the virtual entity for the performance review. I'm going to create a survey that in this example is triggered off of a recurrence. So it happens, in my case, I set it up for every 6 months. And I build one flow to send that survey. Those survey results are submitted, and a second flow, much like the last example, is capturing those results. And I'm using the virtual entities in this case to update Dynamics 365 Human Resources with the survey results. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over and take a look at the demonstration. So I'm here in Dynamics 365 Human Resources, and I'm going to start out by going to System Administration, and on the links, I'm going to open up the Dataverse configuration. Then I'll click on the virtual entities, and here we'll be able to see, it takes a second to load, we'll be able to see the list of virtual entities that have been enabled. So I'm going to go ahead and search for the performance review. Here, I'll type in performance and click apply. And then if we scroll down, you can see I've already generated the virtual entity for performance reviews. So the next step in the process is to go ahead and create our survey. So I'm switching over to customer voice, and I've created a new project already called performance reviews. And inside of that, I have a survey called performance review self-evaluation. I added some personalization to this to include the personnel number. And you can see that I'm passing in the first name as a variable into the survey so that it's personalized. This particular survey, I split it up into 4 different sections. So that means there's 4 pages to the survey. And most of the answers are long answers, and there's only one mandatory question in the survey. So you can obviously put as many questions as you want. We'll talk about some best practices and things like that. And we can customize that post-survey message, which I did for this example. And then we're ready to send it. You can see so far we've sent this 8 times and we've got 1 response. But let's take a look at the Power Automate flow that's used to trigger this. So I click on Edit in the Maker portal for my flow that is sending this. So you can see the recurrence is set to every 6 months. And then I'm actually getting the worker data. This worker data is another virtual entity that I'm using. In my case, I'm filtering it down to just get the first 2 records for demonstration purposes so that it goes quickly. But obviously you can filter that down and do all of your employees. Then for each of the workers that I get from the virtual entity, I'm sending them a survey and passing in that detail about their name and their personnel number. So when I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and click on Run Flow to actually run this flow. So you can see it's running. And if I refresh this page here, you can see that it has succeeded. So if we open this up, you'll be able to see the details of exactly what happened. So we can see it sent 2 of these, and I can see the details about what was sent. So if I switch over to my email, I have the survey that was just sent, and I'll go ahead and click to start that survey. And now I can go fill in the details about this survey. So we'll kind of fill in some information here. I don't answer all of the questions, but hopefully you'll get the idea here. Going through the different pages. So when I kind of scroll down after I've answered the first page of questions, I'll click on Next. And this brings me to that next page. And then I can answer the additional questions. I've got that 1 required question. I click Next to go to that next page. And then when I'm finished with my survey, I'll click Submit. So I can see that message. And if we go back to the flow, we'll be able to see the second flow. So if we edit this flow is being triggered off of a record being created in the customer voice survey responses entity. And then I'm parsing the JSON to get out the context variables that were passed in. And then I create a new record. In my case, I'm using that virtual entity the performance reviews, and you can tell it's a virtual entity because it says MSHR in parentheses at the end. I'm passing in those various different variables. And so you can see that flow just ran. It succeeded. If I open this up, we'll be able to see the details about what was created. If I expand that, you can see exactly what was created. But we'll switch over to human resources, and I'll open up the reviews page so you can see this directly in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. So there's the performance review that just got created by that flow. If we click over to the General tab, we'll be able to see those details, and the ratings is where I put the URL to the actual survey responses. So if I were to click on that, that would open up those survey results, much like the last example that Welly just showed. So with that, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts and those best practices around building your surveys. So it's important to have a plan for creating your surveys, and there's a number of things that you'll want to think about when you're creating your surveys. First, what's the purpose of your survey? For example, you might want to interact with your customers, promote new products or services, or measure customer satisfaction. If your goal is to measure something, you'll want to think about what and how do you want to measure it. You'll also want to think about how long do you want your survey to be. Keep in mind that longer surveys tend to have higher abandon rates, and a good rule of thumb is to keep surveys shorter than 5 minutes or no longer than 10 questions, depending on the type of questions you ask. You'll also want to think about how many mandatory questions you will include. We recommend that you ask as few mandatory questions as possible. And you'll also want to think about how do you want to distribute your survey? For example, do you want to distribute it through email, a QR code, or do you want to automate the process? Once you've planned out your survey, you can start creating it. And there are a few best practices that will enable you to create a meaningful survey and gather good responses from your customers. You can then analyze those responses and act on them in a way that best suits your organization. So some of those best practices around creating surveys include defining an objective. Having an objective allows you to properly plan for your survey. It also allows you to identify what results you expect from your customers, and knowing how you'll use the responses helps you pick the right questions for your surveys. Keep the survey short. If you create a survey that takes a long time to complete, you might reduce your response rate. You'll also want to create a logical flow of questions and ensure that your survey is logical to the respondents and it keeps them interested. You'll also want to organize the survey and group those related questions together. Make sure that you always preview the survey. So after creating your surveys, make sure that you preview it to test and check the overall flow of the survey to catch any mistakes. If you're using branching, you'll want to make sure that you validate and test each of the different branching scenarios in your survey. You'll also want to mention exceptions in the survey invitation. Be sure to mention that in the estimated time that it'll take to complete and give a brief overview of the purpose for the survey. This will help respondents submit the input within the expected time frame. We also recommend that you embed that first question in the invitation email. One of our customers actually almost doubled their response rates by including that first question in the email invitation. Now, when you're thinking about high volume surveys, there are a number of things that you'll want to consider. And high volume surveys could be surveys where you're sending the same survey to a lot of different people, or you're sending lots of surveys to the same people. There are a few best practices to make sure that you create an effective high volume survey. Make sure that you create the project in a non-default environment. The second recommendation is to create a project in your existing production Dataverse environment, or if you don't have one, to create a new production Dataverse environment. When sending a non-anonymous survey, avoid sending a large number of invitations through Power Automate at the same time. Sending more than 8 individual survey invitations per minute might result in processing delays. So the recommendation is to send a large batch of invitations at once, use email, and customize the sender's email address to help recipients identify the survey with your company and improve the survey response rates. When you're using Power Automate to automate the survey responses, processing, or follow-up, be sure to create the workflow by using the account that has capacity to actually run the projected workflow volume. Set up the Power Automate workflow by using an account that has an appropriate Power Automate plan. You'll also want to define that contact frequency. A new feature is being introduced in Customer Voice in April, where the admin can set how frequently a contact can receive the same survey. Avoid survey fatigue and think about the follow-ups on individual surveys, but also consider the overall landscape of all the surveys that are being sent in your organization. So with that, we're going to switch gears and wrap up today with our do's and don'ts and checklist. So we've put together a quick checklist that has some details on how to get started installing, planning your survey, creating a project, a survey, sending it, and analyzing the results. These links will take you right to the docs articles that will help you get started with your first survey. We've also compiled together a variety of links and resources for you to use getting started in your customer voice journey. So we invite you to use these links to get started, learn about the technical documentation, see demos and customer showcases. And there's also some learning paths available out on the Microsoft Learn site. We invite you to check out our community as well at the Customer Voice Forum. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. I'm not sure that we've got any submitted, but we'll give people a moment to kind of send those in through the Q&A panel. I don't know, Welly, if you have any closing comments or if there's anything else new and exciting on the roadmap that's coming in April or beyond that you want to kind of highlight quickly before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think that I also want to call out that we in the forums that we announced all the new features. I drop in the chat that one of the things that we just released this week is for you the ability for you to what we call the safe survey response. So the scenario is that let's say that you receive a survey from Customer Voice on your mobile, you start filling out the survey, maybe survey is a little bit long, and then you don't finish, and then you get home, and then you go to your desktop, and then you click another link, and it will pick up where you left off. So that is a new features that we are releasing this week, and we are going to announce all the new release features in the forum. So I encourage you to go to the forums and subscribe to the notification.
Fantastic. Super exciting new feature coming. Thanks, Welly. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the Q&A panel. This does wrap up our series, but I do invite you all, if you're not already aware, to come to our fireside chat, which is happening on Monday morning. That session will not be recorded. So make sure to get registered. That will be an open forum Q&A type of event where you can ask questions about any of the products and sessions that we've covered in the entire series. So I do invite you to check that out and get registered on that TechTalk Community Dynamics page. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Erin to wrap us up today.
All right. Thank you so much. I have posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd like your feedback on today's session and to hear what you'd like to see in future events. Thank you again for your participation today. And as a reminder, the recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. That concludes today's broadcast, and I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and to our audience. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are.